My name is Lorraine Mayfield, and my daughter pretended to be blind for 20 years. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. It started on a Tuesday. Not that days mean much when you've spent the last 2 decades caring for someone you believed couldn't see the sun rise or fall. But I remember that Tuesday because it was raining and Emily hated the rain. She always said it made her feel lost in the dark. She was sitting at the kitchen table talking on the phone. I was behind her, quiet, unnoticed. I had just come in from the garden. She didn't hear me. Her phone was flat on the table screen, side up. She glanced at it. She looked at it. That's when my body froze. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a trick of angles or reflex. Her eyes followed the text on the screen. I could see the movement, measured, casual, absolutely sighted. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, drenched, holding a basket of wet herbs. I suddenly didn't care about watching the world tilt sideways. For 20 years, I believed my daughter was blind. I'd washed her clothes, read her books aloud, explained every color in vivid, poetic detail, just to keep her feeling part of the world. I'd defended her against doctors who shrugged. I'd begged therapists to try harder. I had bathed her, guided her, sacrificed pieces of myself to keep her afloat. And in one casual moment, she looked at a phone screen. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the years in my head like old home movies. The time she cried because she couldn't see her birthday cake. The moment she asked me what blue felt like. The long talks we had about trust, about surviving in a world that wouldn't understand her condition. Was it all a performance? Was I just the most convenient stage? When she finally went to bed that night, I sat at the kitchen table until 3 a.m. staring at my own hands. They looked old, tired, stiff. And suddenly I wasn't sure if I was heartbroken or enraged. The next morning, I made breakfast like usual. I put the creamer on the left side of her cup like always. I narrated everything. I'm slicing bananas now, sweetheart. I'm putting the eggs 2 inches from your left hand. Your tea is at 12 o'clock. She nodded sweetly, thanked me, never broke character. But now I was watching everything. The way her eyes moved under her lids. The times she didn't wait for me to finish before reaching for something. The moments she flinched at shadows. The pieces were all there. I just hadn't wanted to see them. I think back to the beginning often. Emily was 14 when she went blind. There was no head injury, no clear trauma. She had gone on a weekend trip with friends and returned quiet, pale, and withdrawn. By the end of that week, she claimed her vision was dimming. By the end of the month, she said she couldn't see at all. We took her to every specialist we could afford. They ran tests, brain scans, eye exams. Nobody could explain it. One neurologist even hinted it could be psychosomatic. I took offense. Of course I did. What mother wants to believe their child is pretending to be broken? So I chose the only story that let me keep being the good mother. I believed her. And once I did, the world shifted. I left my job. My husband grew quiet. Our son Michael resented how much attention she got. I told him he was being selfish. He said I was being played. And now, standing at the edge of this quiet betrayal, I wondered if Michael and his father had seen the truth all along. And I had been the fool. No, worse. I had been her accomplice. There was a moment that morning when Emily asked me to describe the color of the sky that I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was insulting. The sky is soft gray today, I said, voice trembling. Almost like wet linen. Oh, she whispered. That sounds sad. I looked at her, eyes wide and perfectly still, and thought, you can see the sky, can't you? I needed proof. Something undeniable. Something that would keep me from doubting myself again. Because mothers, we want to be wrong. We want to believe our children wouldn't lie, wouldn't manipulate, wouldn't steal our years from us one gesture at a time. But I'd seen it now. The phone, the flick of her eyes, the ease. She had looked at a screen, and suddenly the person I loved most in the world was a stranger. The beginning always felt like a blur, like a thick fog I couldn't pierce even if I tried. But now in hindsight, it's shockingly clear. It was late spring when it started. Emily was 14. She had gone on a weekend retreat with her youth group, one of those wholesome camping trips where they roast marshmallows and sing around a fire. She came back subdued, quieter than usual. I chalked it up to exhaustion. But the next day, she complained that things looked dim. By the end of that week, she said she could barely see shapes. And by the following Monday, she told me she was completely blind. Greg, my husband at the time, didn't believe her. "She's being dramatic," he said. "She's always been sensitive." I wanted to slap him. "How can you say that?" I whispered as Emily sat curled in her blanket on the couch, pale and trembling. "She's scared out of her mind, and all you can do is accuse her?" "I'm not accusing," he said quietly. "I'm observing." But I didn't listen. Instead, I started the long journey that would define the next 2 decades of my life. We went to doctor after doctor, specialists in 3 counties, eye exams, neurological testing, CAT scans, blood panels, MRI. None of them could find a single reason for her sudden blindness. And that was the first fork in the road. Some doctors suggested trauma. Maybe something happened on the trip, something psychological, something she couldn't or wouldn't say out loud. Others said it could be conversion disorder, a real condition, yes, but difficult to treat. Sometimes the body finds ways to cope with stress that seem impossible to outsiders. But I had already chosen what I needed to believe. My daughter was blind. My job was to protect her. Greg left about 8 months later. He said he couldn't live in a house of ghosts anymore. He said I was in love with being the martyr. That was the word he used, martyr. "I'm not watching this unfold in slow motion," he said. "You can't see what's happening, Lorraine, and I'm tired of being the only one who does." Then he left, and I stayed. We converted the downstairs office into a bedroom for Emily. I quit my job as a school secretary. I taught her how to navigate the kitchen with tactile markers. I narrated everything I did. I described movies to her. I read her books at night. She would cry sometimes, and I would hold her and say, "I'll never let the world forget you." It felt noble then. It feels hollow now. Looking back, there were inconsistencies. Once I found a makeup brush in her drawer, odd considering she couldn't see. Another time, she adjusted a crooked painting on the wall after brushing past it. She said she felt it was tilted. I dismissed it. I didn't want to be the mother who accused her child of lying about being blind. What if I was wrong? What if the doubt destroyed something already fragile? So I fed the lie. Unknowingly. Willingly. Emily never wanted to learn Braille. She said it gave her headaches. I believed her. She never used a cane in the house. She said she counted steps. I believed her. She didn't want a service dog. She said she didn't like the responsibility. I believed her. It's astonishing what love will let you ignore. But in those early years, I saw her vulnerability as truth. She'd reach for my hand in crowded spaces. She'd cry when she couldn't find her clothes. She once had a meltdown when I rearranged the kitchen cabinets. She leaned on me. And I leaned into being needed. That's the part that haunts me now, how much of my identity became wrapped in her limitations. If she wasn't blind, then who was I? Michael, my son, was always suspicious. He said she was milking it. He once caught her texting when she thought he wasn't looking. I scolded him for it. He was 15 when he moved in with Greg. They were fed up, and I thought they were cruel. Now I wonder if they were just sane. Emily didn't change after her supposed blindness. She sharpened. She became emotionally dominant. Every room belonged to her. Every decision revolved around her. I didn't see it then, but she had weaponized helplessness, and I had handed her the sword. But what if something did happen on that retreat? What if she was assaulted or threatened or traumatized in some way I never discovered? Wouldn't that justify her escape into darkness? Maybe, but not for 20 years, not for hundreds of thousands in disability payments, not for the lies to family, not for the manipulation, and certainly not for looking at a phone screen like it was nothing. I don't know when the lie turned from a shield into a throne, but I do know this. The girl I cradled in my arms, terrified and sobbing, may have been scared once, but the woman sitting at my kitchen table now, she's not scared. She's in control, and I need to take that back. Routines became religion in our house after Emily went blind. Not out of necessity, but out of survival. If I kept everything predictable, lights, sounds, placements, then maybe she'd feel secure. I wanted her to have structure, dignity. I wanted her to trust me. I never realized how much she'd exploited that trust to build a world where she never had to lift a finger. Mornings started early. I'd wake up already listing the steps in my head: coffee pot 6 inches from the sink plate, edges marked with tiny stickers, a bell on her bedroom door, so I'd know when she was awake. She'd always call out, "Mom, is the light on?" And I'd answer with ritualistic sweetness, "Yes, honey. It's a sunny morning." It was our code. A game I didn't know I was losing. She never cleaned up after herself. "I don't want to knock something over," she'd say. Never helped with groceries. Too many sharp corners, she'd insist. Never worked. Who would hire someone like me? And I'd carry the weight. Again, and again, and again. Because guilt is a powerful motivator, and mothers are taught to wear it like skin. The government helped. Of course they did. Disability checks, subsidies, tax benefits. I filled out every form. I attended the interviews with her. I made sure she said the right things, wore dark glasses, moved just slow enough. I didn't know I was coaching a fraud. But she did. Oh, she did. By the time she turned 25, she had her own apartment on paper. In reality, she lived with me most weeks. Said she didn't feel safe alone. I cooked. I cleaned. I reminded her to take vitamins she could see perfectly well on her own. She made friends online. Always audio only. No video calls. Too invasive, she said. And I thought how brave she is to find companionship in the dark. I'm embarrassed now by how noble I made her out to be, like she was some tragic figure wrapped in poetry. She wasn't. She was just good at reading her audience. Sometimes people would say, "Your daughter's so composed for what she's gone through." I'd smile, proud. "She's stronger than people know," I'd reply. I believed it. Because I had to. There were signs, though, so many signs. Like when I found her watching TV once. Not listening, watching. She said she liked the sound of the characters' footsteps, but her head would move with the screen. She'd laugh half a second before the dialogue. Once she caught a fly in midair. I joked, "Not bad for someone who can't see." She turned pale, then forced a laugh. "Even a broken clock is right twice a day." I laughed with her, because the alternative meant my whole life was a lie. Michael came back for Thanksgiving a few years ago. He was older, sharper, distant. He didn't greet her with hugs, just studied her. "You still doing the blind thing?" he asked, deadpan. Emily clutched her cane. "Still doing the rude thing." He looked at me then. "You still buying this, Mom?" I told him to leave. I told him he had no idea what it's like to be in Emily's skin. Now I see he wasn't judging her. He was warning me. I spent years defending her, arguing for her, sacrificing my finances, my social life, my own identity to be her eyes, her voice, her unpaid caregiver. I told people I was lucky she was alive. I didn't say how exhausted I was, how hollow I felt, how sometimes I'd lock myself in the laundry room just to cry without her hearing. And now every moment of that devotion is twisting in my memory. Every hug, every bedtime story, every night I whispered, "You're going to be okay." Was she ever broken or just clever enough to know I'd never question her. I remember a particular Sunday years ago when she said she wanted to join a music class. I was thrilled. We found a small community center offering piano lessons for visually impaired students. She picked it up fast, said she was listening for the keys, but I saw something strange once. She corrected the instructor's finger placement before he even touched the keys. When I brought it up, she said she was guessing. Now I know better. I look at the framed photo on our mantel, Emily at 18, cane in hand, dark sunglasses, smiling at a graduation she didn't earn because I homeschooled her. She never passed a standardized test, never read a textbook, never wrote an essay without dictating it to me. I didn't raise an incapable child. I raised a performer, and I paid for the front row seat. But that Tuesday, when I saw her glance at that phone screen, casual, quick, natural, something inside me cracked. Not like glass, like bone, slow, painful, permanent. Because now I can't unsee it. Now I can't unlove her the same way I used to. And worst of all, I can't unlive the last 20 years. My husband didn't say goodbye the day he left. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He didn't even pack properly. He just took his keys off the hook, stood at the door for a long time, and looked back at me like I was someone he no longer recognized. Then he left, and I stayed behind with the burden of love, the house, and Emily. Greg and I had been together for nearly 20 years when Emily went blind. He had always been the practical one, the one who held things down when I got emotional. We balanced each other. At least I thought we did. But when Emily's world supposedly went dark, ours began to collapse in slow motion. The first cracks were subtle. He'd roll his eyes when I narrated the weather. He'd grow quiet during the endless therapy sessions. He started sleeping in the guest room, not because we were fighting, but because I stayed up all night reading to Emily. He began disappearing on weekends, said he needed space. I believed he was grieving differently than I was. Now I know he was just withdrawing. One night I caught him sitting alone in the garage, staring into the dark. "She's lying to you," he said without turning around. I froze. "Greg, no one goes blind like that. No trauma, no evidence, no degeneration, just darkness overnight." He shook his head. "Come on, Lorraine, she's scared. She's manipulative," he said. "And if you'd stop playing saint for 5 minutes, you'd see it." Those words cut me. Not because they were cruel, but because they came from the man who once cradled her at birth with tears in his eyes. If he could turn on her, what did that say about me? "I won't abandon her," I said quietly. "You already abandoned everyone else," he replied. Greg filed for separation 3 months later. No arguments, no scandal. Just a quiet document in a manila envelope on the dining room table. Emily asked if we were divorcing because of her. I told her of course not. Now I wonder if she asked only to hear me say it. Another way to test my loyalty. And I gave it. Like I always did. In the early years after he left, I found ways to cope. I told myself I was doing something important. That taking care of Emily was a sacred calling. That love meant sacrifice. I wore my isolation like a badge of honor. Friends stopped inviting me out. I always had an excuse. Emily wasn't feeling well. Emily had therapy. Emily had a new medication that needed monitoring. Eventually they stopped calling. Michael too. He grew into a stranger. Called once a month. Then every few months. Then not at all. The house grew quieter, colder. Emily filled the space. She became my everything. She loved that. That's what I see clearly now, how much she loved being at the center of it all. She would sigh dramatically when I walked away from her. She'd call out, "Where are you, Mom?" if I spent too long in the bathroom. She couldn't stand silence unless it was her silence. I remember once I tried to take a painting class. Something small, just one evening a week. Emily panicked. "What if something happens and I can't reach you?" I promised to keep my phone on. "That's not the same," she whispered. You know I feel safer when you're near. So I dropped the class. And I told myself it was love. But now I understand it was control. The thing about caregiving is that it blurs lines. When you're wiping someone's tears, it's hard to see their manipulation. When you're cooking their meals, it's easy to mistake dependence for love. When you're narrating every moment of your day, you start to forget you had your own story once. And I did forget. I forgot what it felt like to be a woman, a wife, a mother to more than one child, a friend, a person with dreams and time of her own. Emily didn't blind herself. She blinded me. Looking back, Greg tried to reach me. Before he gave up, he left notes on the fridge on my pillow. Little things. I miss you. You don't have to do this alone. She doesn't need you as much as you think. I didn't listen. I thought he was trying to make me choose, and I had already chosen. The day he left, Emily was quiet. Too quiet. No tears, no panic. She simply asked, "Do you still believe me?" And I said, "Of course." She smiled. It wasn't the smile of someone broken. It was the smile of someone winning. I found out years later that Greg had remarried. He sent me a letter once, no return address. He said he hoped I was well, that he thought about Emily sometimes, that he never stopped hoping I'd see the truth. I shredded the letter, but I kept the envelope. Sometimes I lie awake wondering, what if I had listened? What if I had let myself believe, even just for a moment, that Greg was right? Would I have saved my marriage? Would Michael have stayed? Would I still have the same haunted look in the mirror that I try so hard to cover with foundation? I'll never know. But I do know this: I chose Emily. And she used that choice like a leash. There was one night about 10 years in when I snapped. I had been up with her for 3 days straight. She said her insomnia was worse, that the darkness was pressing in. I cooked, bathed her, massaged her legs when they cramped. And then, at 3 a.m., she said she wanted lasagna. Now I asked. She nodded. I've been craving it for days. And you always say food helps me sleep. I stood in the kitchen staring at the fridge. Then I screamed. A raw, awful sound that ripped out of me like something feral. She didn't move. She didn't flinch. She just said, "I didn't know I wasn't allowed to be hungry." I cried that night until the sun came up. She came into the kitchen, guided by the wall like always. She touched my hand. "I'm sorry you're upset," she whispered. Not, "I'm sorry I pushed you." Not, "Are you okay?" Just another manipulation cloaked in softness. And still I made her breakfast. I had built my life around her darkness, but now I'm starting to wonder if mine was darker all along, not because I couldn't see, but because I refused to look. The human brain is incredible at editing the truth. You can live inside a lie for so long that it becomes architecture walls, furniture, family photos on mantles. You walk through it daily, vacuum its carpets, water its plants. You don't question the cracks in the ceiling because you've told yourself they've always been there. That was my life with Emily. It wasn't until I stepped back, really stepped back, that I began to see the rot in the foundation. And it started with one simple question: who was Emily when no one was watching? She claimed to be blind, but blind people feel their way through the world. They reach tap test. Emily didn't. She moved smoothly, too smoothly. Her body never hesitated. She never knocked over a glass, never stubbed a toe, never misplaced her way from the hallway to the kitchen, even when furniture shifted. She'd say things like, "Did you change the curtains?" or "You look tired." I used to think she was intuitive, empathic. Now I know she was just looking. The Tuesday I caught her glancing at her phone was a rupture. But it wasn't just that moment, it was the absence of surprise. She didn't flinch. She didn't try to explain. She just looked like she always had the right to. That night, I didn't confront her. Instead, I started testing her. The next day, I accidentally left a candle burning in the living room, a tall one red wax right at eye level. She walked by it twice and never once asked if something was burning. She didn't flinch when the flame flickered close to her hand. Then I rearranged the furniture, just slightly, moved the couch 3 inches, shifted a lamp, tucked a footstool in a new spot. She never stumbled, never asked, navigated it all like muscle memory and perfect vision. Then came the ultimate test. I left a $20 bill on the table, just sitting there quiet and casual like bait. She walked in talking on the phone, laughed, gossiped, then reached directly for the bill and slipped it into her hoodie pocket without breaking stride. I nearly dropped my coffee, but I didn't say a word, because the part of me that was mother still needed evidence, closure, permission to admit the unthinkable that my daughter, my baby girl, had been lying to me for 2 decades. It's hard to describe what that realization does to a mother. It's not just betrayal, it's erasure. 20 years of caretaking, sacrificed dreams, silent tears in the dark reduced to a con. And I had funded it, enabled it, protected it, loved it. God help me, I still loved her. But love without truth is a cage, and I was tired of being caged. I started keeping a journal. I wrote down everything she did that contradicted her condition, watched TV with her eyes moving across the screen, commented on new decor she was never told about, applied lipstick without a mirror, dodged a dropped plate mid-fall. Every entry was a brick. I was rebuilding my sanity one observation at a time, and then came the turning point. Emily had a friend, Cynthia, a sweet girl, kind, loyal, naive. She came over once a week, always patient, always upbeat. She brought her crochet work, sat with Emily for hours, telling stories, making tea. She believed Emily's blindness like gospel. But one afternoon, Cynthia forgot her phone. I found it buzzing on the kitchen table. I didn't mean to snoop, but when I picked it up, the lock screen lit up with a message preview. Did she buy the act today? My blood turned cold. I opened the message. It was from Emily. The full text read, "Did she buy the act today? LOL." She looked at me like I was the Virgin Mary or something. I swear I could cry. This is too easy. I felt the phone slip from my hand. I sat down. I think my mouth said, "Oh my God," but no sound came out. Emily hadn't just been lying. She had been mocking me, behind my back, to her friend, turning my loyalty into a joke. And in that moment, something in me died. It's hard to say what came first, rage or grief, but both showed up like unwanted guests. I wanted to storm into her room, scream until the walls cracked, force her to admit it, but I didn't. I needed more. I needed her to expose herself. Not just to me, but to the world. To everyone who had called me gullible. Everyone who had pulled away. Everyone who had left me for choosing her. So I started planning. I stopped correcting her when she misplaced things. I watched her more closely. I filmed her. Yes. I started using my phone like a detective, quiet clips of her watching TV, of her reading a receipt, of her texting without voice commands. Little by little, I gathered truth. And as the footage grew, my heartbreak hardened into resolve. I was going to end this, but I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to reclaim my life. There's something haunting about realizing your child has two faces. One they show to the world, and one they show to you, the one who gave them life. I had seen both now, and I knew which one I was going to confront. I printed out the message she sent Cynthia. I placed it in an envelope. I slid it under her bedroom door without a word. She didn't say anything that day. Not a sound. But the silence was electric, like a wire pulled too tight, like something about to snap. That night, she sat across from me at dinner, didn't touch her food, didn't wear her glasses. She just stared at me. Finally, she spoke. "You went through my things." "No," I said. Yours came through mine. She narrowed her eyes. The mask was slipping. I don't know what you think you saw. I smiled. I saw everything, Emily. The morning after that dinner, Emily didn't come out of her room. No sounds, no movement, no call for coffee, no question about the weather. I stood in the hallway outside her door listening to silence so loud it rang in my ears. She was thinking, calculating, rehearsing. Because that's what manipulators do when the lie begins to collapse. I had spent 20 years rising with her needs, catering to them like rituals. My morning coffee brewed quietly while I prepared hers with exactly 1 teaspoon of sugar and a splash of almond milk. She liked it that way, said it helped her feel normal, and every day I gave her that normalcy thinking I was offering love. Now I understood it had been leverage, her way of training me. But that morning I only made 1 cup, mine. I sat in the living room, alone, waiting. An hour passed before I heard her door creak open. I didn't turn. She shuffled out barefoot. No cane, no sunglasses. Her bare eyes scanned the floor as if testing me. I stayed still. Let her perform. She cleared her throat. You're not making me coffee today, I sipped mine. Calm. I thought you'd already seen the pot was empty. Silence. I looked up. That was the first time she didn't flinch or play coy. Her mouth opened to say something, then closed. She turned and walked back into her room. That entire day we didn't speak. She didn't ask for help. Didn't reach for my hand. Didn't pretend to trip. She simply stayed out of sight. And I let her. I sat in that quiet, sorting through the recordings, the screenshots, the little notes in my journal. I didn't know what I would do with them yet. I only knew this: I was building a case. Not for court. Not for the police. But for myself. For the mother who had buried her identity in guilt. For the woman who deserved to come out of hiding. The next few days were a tense standoff. Emily tried subtle tactics. She turned off the bathroom light and asked me why it was so dark. She accidentally poured water outside the glass. She tripped slightly on the carpet edge. But there was no fear in her eyes, only calculation. She was testing if I'd still rush in. I didn't. I watched her compose each scene like a playwright, careful, manipulative, emotionally sharp. She was still playing the blind girl. Only now I was no longer her audience. Then came the meltdown. It was Thursday afternoon. I was folding laundry when I heard the scream. A sharp, dramatic cry followed by a crash. I dropped the shirt in my hands and walked to the living room. She was on the floor, legs twisted awkwardly, a lamp shattered beside her. She whimpered. I fell. I didn't see. I stood over her. Silent. She looked up, eyes glistening with unshed tears. I was trying to make myself tea, she whispered. I guess I'm just a burden now. The old me would have rushed in, arms out, voice trembling. But the woman standing there now. She saw the setup. I'm glad you didn't hurt yourself, I said calmly. Next time, maybe turn on the light. Her face paled. You're cruel, she spat. I didn't answer, because silence was the one thing she couldn't perform around. Later that night, she came into the kitchen while I was cooking. No pretense. She stood behind me and said, What do you want? I turned off the stove. I want the truth. She crossed her arms. Why now? Because I've spent 20 years being a mother to a child who never needed what I gave. Her jaw tightened. I didn't ask for any of this. No, you pretended you didn't need to. She stepped closer. You think I had it easy? Do you know how many times I thought of telling the truth? How many nights I wanted to stop? Then why didn't you? Her voice cracked. Because you needed it. That caught me off guard. You needed to feel important. She continued. You needed to be the savior, the caretaker. You needed me to be broken because you didn't know who you were without someone to fix. I wanted to deny it. But part of it was true. That was the final cruelty of her manipulation. It preyed not only on my compassion, but on my identity. I was 14, she said. One lie turned into 2, then 10, then 100, then a whole life. That doesn't make it okay? She looked at me. No, but it makes it mine. That night, I sat in my room staring at the photo of the 3 of us, Greg, me, and Emily, at her 6th birthday. The light in our eyes, the cake crumbs on her face, the realness of that moment. Before the retreat, before the performance, before the script took over. I cried quietly, not for the years lost, but for the version of her I had buried beneath the lie, and for the version of myself I had forgotten. The next morning, I called my son. I hadn't spoken to Michael in nearly a year. When he answered, his voice was stiff, guarded. "Mom, I need to tell you something," I said, "and I need you to listen." I told him everything. The recordings, the texts, the phone, the confrontation, the lie, the truth. There was a long pause when I finished. Then quietly he said, "I knew. I always knew. I know," I whispered. "I'm sorry." "You don't have to apologize to me," he said. "Just don't lie to yourself anymore." That's when I knew what had to happen. Emily needed consequences, and I needed closure. I didn't want revenge. I wanted release. So I filed a report with the State Disability Office. I submitted the footage, the logs, the evidence. They told me there would be an investigation, that she might lose her benefits, that there could be legal consequences. I said I understood. I didn't do it to hurt her. I did it to end the lie. She hasn't spoken to me since the letter arrived in the mail. She slammed her bedroom door and hasn't come out. But for the first time in years, I'm not scared. I'm not wondering how she'll retaliate, because now I'm the one with the truth. And truth, as I've learned, is a power I should have claimed long ago. The house feels different now. Not quieter. Emily had always made herself small and sound when it suited her. Not emptier. Her things still fill the corners. Her scent still clings to pillows, to sweaters left on chairs. But different. As if the walls themselves have exhaled. As if the truth stripped away the illusion of home and revealed something colder, harder underneath. This isn't a sanctuary anymore. It's a stage after the curtain's fallen. Emily stayed in her room for 3 days after the state letter arrived. I heard the muffled sound of her pacing, the clicking of her phone keys, the occasional drawer opening and slamming shut. But no crying, no screams, not even a "why." That's how I knew the lie had always been rehearsed. Even her silence was staged now, crafted to suggest pain, injustice, betrayal. But I didn't fall for it. I had already seen too much. On the 4th day, she came out. No sunglasses, no cane, no limp, just Emily in the flesh. She stood in the middle of the living room, arms folded across her chest, hair tied back like armor. "You think they won't come after you too?" she asked. My voice was calm. "I didn't commit fraud. You raised me. You took the checks. You built this house with money I brought in. I let that sit in the air. Because she wasn't wrong. I had taken those checks. I had filled out the paperwork. I had let myself believe even when doubt scratched at the back of my skull like a rat in the walls. But I also cooked, cleaned, dressed. You carried. You built my entire life around a lie I didn't know I was part of." "That's not my fault," she snapped. "No. It's mine," I said. "I loved you so much that I let you disappear into a story. And I disappeared with you." She didn't reply, because what was left to say? I told her the investigators would likely come. She might lose her benefits, might have to repay what she took, might face charges. Her lips twitched. Not fear, not remorse. Calculation. "Maybe I'll just leave," she said. "Start over. Somewhere new." "You could have done that at any time," I said. "I stayed for you." No, you stayed for the comfort. That struck her. Finally, her mouth trembled. She blinked fast, looking away. Don't you dare try to make this all on me, she whispered. I'm not, I said. I'm just not carrying it for you anymore. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to the state, not to her, not even to Greg, to myself. I wrote down every moment I could remember from the last 20 years where I felt uneasy, confused, manipulated. The birthday party where she forgot the guests' names but later recited each one's gift. The therapist she stopped seeing because he didn't believe her blindness was real. The time she described a stranger's outfit in perfect detail while claiming she'd overheard it described. I wrote it all down. Each memory like a thorn pulled from skin. It didn't heal me, not instantly, but it stopped the bleeding. A week passed. Emily didn't apologize. She didn't beg. She simply acted like nothing had happened, except now she no longer bothered with the blind act. She watched TV with the lights on. She scrolled her phone. She walked confidently. When the mail arrived, she read the return addresses before I did, and she never once looked ashamed. Then one morning, I found her suitcase by the front door. Not packed exactly, just there, like a threat, like a test. I stood there staring at it for a long time. Finally, I asked, "Going somewhere?" She didn't look up from her cereal. Eventually, I nodded. "Let me know when you do. I'll help you get there." She blinked. That, that was the moment she realized I meant it. She no longer held me hostage. I think she expected me to chase her, beg her to stay, promise I wouldn't report anything else. But I didn't. Because for the first time in 2 decades, I wasn't performing for her. I was living for me. I started changing things around the house. I took down the blackout curtains in her room, opened the windows, let the light in. I donated the audiobooks I had collected over the years. I canceled the automatic medication refills she no longer needed. And then I did something unthinkable. I applied for a job. It was a part-time role at a local bookstore, a quiet place filled with dusty shelves and the comforting scent of old paper. When I walked in for the interview, the manager smiled and asked, "What made you want to apply here?" I hesitated. Then I said, "I used to be someone else. I'd like to remember who she was." She nodded. Hired me on the spot. It was the first decision I'd made in years that was purely mine. Coming home that evening, my arms full of books and breath full of something new, I found Emily standing by the door. She looked at me with narrowed eyes. "You seem different." "I am." She picked at her cuticle, a nervous tick. "You going somewhere?" I just did. She studied me, looking for the old mother, the puppet, the stagehand behind the curtains. But I was gone. The next morning, she left. No note, no hug, just a hollow bedroom and a cold cup of coffee she didn't bother to drink. I watched from the window as she walked down the street. No stumble, no hesitation, just steps calculated, direct, clear. She didn't look back, and neither did I. It's strange how quiet freedom sounds. No more whispered demands from across the house. No more heavy footsteps in the hallway at 2 a.m. No more performative sighs when I took too long to refill a glass of water. Just the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the old wood floor, the occasional chirp of birds outside. At first, the silence felt like guilt. Then it began to feel like healing. For 20 years, I didn't live in my house, I served in it. I was on call constantly. Every cough, every fabricated stumble, every "Mom, I can't see, where are you?" was a leash. A leash I willingly wrapped around my own neck. Now that the leash was gone, I didn't quite know what to do with my hands. So I started small. I rearranged the furniture in the living room, placed the couch near the windows to let in natural light. I repotted the dusty peace lily that Emily used to pretend she couldn't find. I threw away the chipped mugs labeled "World's Best Mom." Not because I didn't want to be her mother, but because I refused to be her hostage anymore. Michael came by unexpectedly a few days later. He stood in the doorway with a grocery bag in one hand and a suspiciously cautious look in his eyes. "I brought coffee," he said. "Not the instant kind, I hope." He smiled, and for the first time in years it reached his eyes. We sat at the table like strangers trying to remember how to be family. "You really did it," he finally said. "I did." He looked around. "Where is she gone?" "Not sure where." "She didn't say." He nodded. Then he reached into the grocery bag and pulled out a small envelope. "What's this? Something you might want to read?" he said. Inside the envelope was a letter, not from Michael, but from Greg. Apparently, Michael had kept it for years, unsure if I was ready to see it. I unfolded the worn paper and began reading. "Lorraine, I'm sorry I left the way I did. I didn't know how to help you without becoming your enemy. Every time I tried to talk about Emily, you looked at me like I was attacking her. But I wasn't. I was trying to save you. I still remember the woman I married. Strong, funny, passionate. You disappeared, Lorraine. You became someone else, a servant in your own life, and you wouldn't let me rescue you. So I left. Not because I stopped loving you, but because you stopped loving yourself. I hope someday you come back. G." I stared at the letter for a long time, not because it shocked me, but because I finally understood what it meant to be seen by someone and still be left behind. Greg had loved me, truly, deeply, but he couldn't compete with the version of me that had wrapped herself around Emily like armor. And now that I was out of the armor, I was left wondering if that woman, the one Greg married, still existed. Michael poured us both coffee and sat quietly while I folded the letter. "I think he'd want to hear from you," he said. "Maybe. Do you want to hear from him?" I looked out the window. I didn't know. But for the first time, I was open to finding out. The next week was full of small beginnings. I started working part-time at the bookstore, dusting shelves, recommending novels, chatting with customers. The owner, June, was a widow with a gentle voice and a sharp wit. She reminded me what friendship felt like. She also introduced me to the concept of boundaries. Helping someone isn't the same as handing them your life, she told me one afternoon as we shelved new arrivals. I smiled. I wish someone had told me that 20 years ago. She raised an eyebrow. Someone probably did. But you weren't ready to hear it. She wasn't wrong. Emily called once. Blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was calm, measured. "Hey, Mom. Just wanted to let you know I'm okay. Got a place? Nothing fancy, but it's mine. I'm figuring things out." A pause. "You probably hate me. I get it. But I hope someday you'll remember I'm still your daughter." Click. No apology, no ownership, just her version of the truth. I didn't call back. Not because I hated her, but because healing meant not rushing back into a fire just because someone called it a candle. One night, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine and watched the sunset. The sky turned that familiar soft orange that always reminded me of summer when Emily was little before the lie began. Back when she used to run barefoot in the yard, her hair catching the sun, her laughter echoing between the trees. Back when I believed everything she said because she was my daughter, and children don't lie to their mothers. But now I knew better. They can. And sometimes they do. Not because they're evil, but because they can. And because we let them. A part of me will always ache for the girl she pretended to be. The one I carried, protected, sacrificed for. But that girl didn't exist. And the real Emily, she'll have to live with the choices she made. Just as I now live with mine. The morning after that voicemail, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I sat down and wrote a letter. To Greg. Not to fix the past. Not to rebuild a life that was already gone. But to tell him I had finally come back to myself. That I remembered the woman he fell in love with. That I missed her too. And I was learning day by day how to become her again. I mailed it the next day. No expectations, no return address, just a message in a bottle tossed into the ocean of memory. I thought letting go would feel like a grand release. Like one day I'd wake up and the weight would be gone. My spine unburdened my chest. Light, my breath easy. But that's not how it works. Grief isn't dramatic. It's subtle. It shows up in the quiet pauses, the untouched cereal bowl, the pair of sunglasses still tucked in a drawer, the toothbrush that hasn't been used in weeks but I haven't yet thrown away. Letting go isn't loud. It's slow. And it hurts in places you didn't even know existed. The bookstore became my refuge. Each morning, I arrived early and stood at the front display window letting the early sun warm my face as I unlocked the door. The bell chimed overhead as I stepped in. Familiar, soft, like the voice of an old friend. Customers came and went, some chatty, some silent, most unaware that they were walking through a place that had slowly stitched me back together. June gave me space to heal without asking me to explain. She understood grief, the kind that doesn't come from death but from disappointment. "I know that look," she said once, catching me standing too long in front of a shelf of parenting books. "That's the look of a woman rereading the past in her head." I smiled faintly. "You think there's still a way to change it?" she asked. "No," I said. "But sometimes I wish I could explain it to the woman I used to be." That night, I sat with an old photo album. It was heavy in my lap, the way all the past is when you finally decide to carry it with open eyes. There was Emily, age 5, hugging her stuffed rabbit like it was her only friend. Then, Emily at 10, already distant, already watching me with a kind of calculation I didn't recognize at the time. By 14, she had stopped smiling in photos altogether. I used to think it was just teenage moodiness. Now, I wonder if it was guilt. Or maybe it was power. I found a letter tucked between 2 pages, folded neatly, unfamiliar handwriting. It was from her high school guidance counselor. I'd forgotten all about it. In it, she talked about Emily's absences, her resistance to wearing her visual aid device, the stories she told that didn't line up. "She's very bright," the letter said, "but I wonder sometimes if she's performing something for attention or survival." I remembered tossing that letter aside when I got it. I thought they didn't understand her, that they were doubting her experience. Now I realized they had seen what I refused to. I wondered how many people had tried to warn me. Michael, Greg, even strangers. And I had silenced them all with my motherly conviction. She needs me. She's doing her best. She's blind. But the truth is, I was the one blind. Blinded by love and by fear. Because if she had been lying, what did that say about me? A week later, Michael called again. "Mom, you okay? I'm here." "Good." Pause. "She called me," he said. My stomach clenched. "What did she say?" "She's staying with some guy. Works nights. Small town. Says she's doing fine. Did you believe her?" He hesitated. "Let's just say I didn't offer to visit." I nodded silently. Then he asked the one question I hadn't let myself face. "Do you miss her?" "Yes. God help me, yes." I missed her even now, even with all the betrayal, because I didn't just miss her. I missed who I thought she was. I missed the story I had wrapped myself in for 20 years, the bedtime routines, the laughter, the fake stumbles that I used to think were endearing, the "I love you" Mom whispered after I tucked her in. I missed the idea of her, and ideas are harder to bury than people. "I do," I said finally. "But that doesn't mean I want her back the same way." Michael didn't speak for a moment. Then, "That's fair." That weekend, I took a day trip to the ocean. Just me. I hadn't done something like that in years. I stood barefoot in the sand and let the water kiss my ankles. And I thought about Emily. How she used to pretend she could feel the ocean through sound. How she described it with poetic, vivid words. Now I knew those words weren't imaginary. She had seen it. She had seen everything. And lied anyway. I picked up a shell. White, smooth, perfect. Then I threw it back into the sea. Not angrily, not with bitterness. Just release. Because the ocean doesn't care about your illusions. It just takes what you offer and keeps moving. On the way home, I stopped at a roadside diner. The waitress was a teenager, nervous, eager. I watched how she spoke to an older woman at the counter. Patient, respectful. And I wondered who would Emily have been if she had made different choices. If she had told the truth early, admitted the lie, asked for forgiveness. Would I have forgiven her? I don't know. But I do know this. She chose her path. And I'm choosing mine. Later that night, I got another call from an unknown number. Voicemail again. Hi, Mom. Just checking in. Don't worry, I'm not asking for money. Just wanted you to know I'm okay. I'm working part-time. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. I think about you. I miss you. Anyway, that's all? Click. I sat with that voicemail for a long time. Did she mean it? Was it another performance? Or was she really starting to live honestly? I didn't know. And that uncertainty would have broken me once. Now I let it drift by like a cloud, because her truth isn't mine to carry anymore. It had been nearly 2 months since Emily walked out of my home. 2 months since I stopped waking in panic, wondering if I'd hear her call out for help. Or worse, not hear her at all. Now I woke to silence, not heavy or haunted, just clean. I'd begun filling my mornings with small rituals again, not obligations rituals, a walk to the park, a cup of tea on the porch, watering the garden I'd neglected for years. Some days I still reached for an extra mug out of habit. Then I'd laugh, shake my head, and put it back. One Thursday morning, I received a letter. Not a text, not an email. A handwritten letter in a simple white envelope. The handwriting was familiar, slanted, pressed too hard into the paper like she was trying to make every word count. It was from Emily. Dear Mom, I've been thinking about writing this for a while, but every time I picked up a pen, I didn't know what to say. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because I felt too much, and none of it made sense. You probably think I don't regret what I did, that I'm a monster, that I manipulated you because I hated you, but I didn't. I lied because I was afraid of being average, of being invisible, of not being the girl you gave everything for. And once the lie started, I didn't know how to stop. I paused. The words blurred. I blinked them back into focus. Her voice, so familiar, echoed in my head with every sentence. She went on. You were always strong, always certain. People looked up to you. I did too. And that terrified me. I didn't know how to match your strength, so I made you weaker by needing you. I know how awful that sounds. But I think part of me believed that if you needed me too, you'd never leave. I gripped the letter tightly. It was the first time she had acknowledged my side of the story. My exhaustion, my sacrifices, my loss. And still, I didn't know if I was ready to forgive her. I'm not asking you to forget what I did, or even to trust me again. But I hope you'll believe that I'm trying. I got a job, real job, not disability money. I take the bus. I walk to the store. And yeah, it's hard. But every day I try to look people in the eye, even when it's uncomfortable, especially then. I read that part twice, because that was the version of Emily I never got to meet. The version I might have loved without reservation if she hadn't buried herself so deep behind a lie. Sometimes I still want to fake it, to be helpless. It's easier. But I remind myself that the cost of faking is losing you. And that price is too high now. I don't expect an answer. I just wanted you to know. Emily. I folded the letter slowly, laid it on the table, and stared at it. For a long, long time. I didn't cry. I didn't rush to call her. But I did feel something shift inside me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But possibility. Like a door cracked open. That evening, I went to visit Michael. He was playing with his two young kids in the yard when I pulled up. When he saw me, he waved them inside. I handed him the letter. He read it in silence, then handed it back. "She sounds different," he said. "She does." "You believe her?" "I believe she wants to change." He nodded. "That's something." "It is." We sat on the porch for a while, watching the kids run past the windows, their laughter ringing through the air. "Do you think you'll talk to her?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. "But I think I've finally stopped needing her to be someone she isn't. That's probably the healthiest thing I've ever heard you say." I smiled. Over the next few days, I read the letter again. And again. Each time, a different line hit harder. By the fifth time, I noticed what she hadn't said. She hadn't asked to come home. Hadn't asked for money. Hadn't blamed me. That silence said more than anything else. One evening, I stood in the kitchen slicing apples. The radio hummed low behind me. I found myself smiling at nothing. Just smiling. That was the moment I realized I hadn't thought about the lie all day. Not once. It hadn't haunted me, controlled me, defined me. I was just me again. That night, I sat down with a blank sheet of paper, and I began to write. "Emily, thank you for your letter. I read it many times. Each time I found something new in it, something honest, something painful, something real. I can't pretend your actions didn't hurt me. They did. Deeply. But for the first time, I feel like I'm hearing your real voice, not the one you rehearsed, but the one underneath all that fear. I don't know what our future looks like, but I'm open to having one if it's built on truth, not performance. Take care of yourself. Mom." I didn't send the letter right away. I let it sit on the table for a few days. Then I mailed it. No expectation, just release. The next chapter, whatever it would be, would have to begin with both of us standing eyes open, back straight, lies left behind. No more pretending, no more blindness, just truth. Even if it hurt, even if it healed. The days after I sent that letter passed slowly. Not painfully, but deliberately, like they were aware that something had shifted. As if time itself knew that we were standing at the edge of a new chapter and wanted to give me space to breathe before I stepped across. I didn't expect a reply, and for a while none came. Instead, I kept moving forward, not toward Emily, but toward myself. At the bookstore, June noticed the change. "You're standing taller," she said one afternoon, while I was shelving fiction titles alphabetically. "I am?" She gave me that sly smile. "You are. There's more color in your cheeks. You're laughing more. Even your walk, it's like you're finally here." I thought about that. How much of my life had I lived as a shadow beside Emily's stage? Even when I left the house, I was still mentally tethered to her needs, her moods, her schedule. But now I moved at my own rhythm. For the first time in 2 decades, I didn't feel like a prop in someone else's performance. One afternoon, I found an old scrapbook buried in a closet. It was one I'd made years ago before the lie consumed us. There were baby photos of Emily, her chubby hands, her gap-toothed smile. Finger paintings, school certificates, crayon drawings that proudly labeled me as best mom ever. I traced the edge of one of the pages and whispered, "Where did you go?" Because that little girl, I loved her with everything I had, and I still did. Even if she had become someone else. Even if the truth had been twisted for years, that love hadn't vanished. It had just gone into hiding. And then one morning, a letter arrived. This time the handwriting was neater, steadier. There was no envelope, just a folded note taped to a small brown box on my front porch. I opened the box first. Inside was a pair of shoes, old worn ballet flats, Emily's, from before everything fell apart. the ones she'd claimed to have lost years ago. I stared at them confused. Then I unfolded the note. Mom, you used to say, "The truth always leaves footprints. These are mine. I kept them because I wasn't ready to admit I'd walked a different path. That I'd lied with every step. I'm not that girl anymore. But I needed you to see the shoes. To know I remember where I started and how far I veered from it. I'm working at a diner now. The pay's not great. But I look people in the eye and I tell them the truth when they ask how I'm doing. That's new for me. I don't know if I deserve to be in your life again. But I hope one day you'll let me earn it, not as your dependent, not as your burden, but as your daughter. Truthfully, Emily." I pressed the note to my chest and sat with it. Not crying, not smiling, just breathing. The shoes sat beside me, worn small and impossibly heavy with meaning. They weren't an apology. They were a confession. And that mattered more. A week later, I replied, I didn't overthink it. I didn't pour my pain into paragraphs. I just wrote, Emily, thank you for the shoes. I remember them. I remember you in them. I don't know what comes next, but I'm willing to find out. Mom. 2 days later, she called. This time, I picked up. Her voice was soft, careful. Hi. Hi, Emily. Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't awkward. It was tender, uncertain, human. How's work? I asked. She chuckled. Exhausting, but honest. Honest is good. Yeah, it is. We talked for 20 minutes. About nothing important. About the weather. Her coworkers. A new book I was reading. Not once did we talk about the lie. And that felt right. Because that chapter had already been written. Now we were drafting a new one. After we hung up, I sat on the porch and watched the wind move through the trees. The sun was setting gold and soft and forgiving. And for the first time in 20 years, I let myself hope. Not for things to go back to the way they were, but for something new, something honest, something earned. The day I stepped into Dr. Matthews's office, I felt like I was carrying the weight of every year I had spent wrapped up in Emily's darkness, literal and metaphorical. The room was quiet, almost too quiet, with the soft hum of fluorescent lights above and the faint scent of lavender drifting through the air. Everything about it was designed to be calming safe, but I was anything but calm. I was a woman on the edge of unraveling, still clutching the frayed thread of hope that maybe somehow this could all make sense, and maybe just, maybe, it could be fixed. Dr. Matthews greeted me with a warm smile, but there was no pretense in her eyes. She was the kind of person who listens without judgment, who offers understanding without pity. I needed that. I needed someone to see through the fog and chaos that had consumed my family for so long. I began to speak almost hesitantly, at first laying bare the story I had lived for 2 decades, a daughter who was blind in every sense we believed, who depended on me entirely, who manipulated every facet of her life to maintain a carefully constructed illusion. 20 years of caregiving, of sacrifice, of love and betrayal, intertwined so tightly that I could no longer tell where one ended and the other began. Dr. Matthews listened quietly, nodding occasionally, letting me fill the room with memories of doctors' visits. Hospital rooms, late-night vigils, and the endless emotional labor of pretending that the truth wasn't staring me in the face. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then she spoke, her voice soft but steady. What you're describing aligns with what psychologists call malingering, she said gently. It's the deliberate fabrication or exaggeration of symptoms for external gain, often financial, social, or psychological. But it's rarely a simple matter of dishonesty. I blinked, surprised. I had always thought malingering was cold and calculated, someone trying to scam the system to cheat their way through life. But Dr. Matthews explained it wasn't always so black and white. Many times, she said, it begins as a subconscious coping mechanism, a response to trauma or overwhelming stress. It may start as a way to protect oneself from a perceived threat or unbearable reality. I thought about Emily at 14, the sudden, unexplained blindness, the retreat, the silence afterward, the fear in her eyes, the distance in her voice. Had she been hurt in a way I never knew? Was this her way of shutting down? Dr. Matthews continued. Malingering can become a form of control, a way to exert power over an environment that feels chaotic or unsafe. The symptoms become a mask, a persona, and over time, this mask can become a prison. I shivered. That prison, she said, can trap both the person pretending and the people around them. Families become caretakers and enablers. Boundaries blur, roles shift, and often no one knows how to escape. That was my life, 20 years trapped in a prison of my daughter's making and my own unwillingness to see the truth. We talked about family dynamics, about the toll it had taken on my marriage, on my relationship with my son Michael, on my own identity. I shared how Greg had left, how Michael had drifted away, and how I had lost myself in being a mother to a blind child who wasn't blind at all. Dr. Matthews didn't offer quick fixes or platitudes. Instead, she helped me name the pain and the confusion. She explained that healing would not be linear or easy. There would be setbacks, anger, grief, but also the possibility of reclaiming my life and redefining my relationship with Emily. She suggested family therapy. It wasn't a solution, it was a beginning. A way to open communication channels that had long been closed, to confront the pain with honesty and to start rebuilding trust one fragile brick at a time. I wasn't sure if Emily would agree, if she could be honest after so many years of deception, if I could face the woman she really was without anger consuming me. But I knew I had to try. Our first session was tense. Emily arrived late, avoiding eye contact, her posture rigid. She didn't want to be there, that much was clear. The room felt heavy with years of unspoken words, false smiles, and hidden resentments. Dr. Matthews started gently asking questions about early memories, feelings, and fears. Emily was cautious, answering vaguely, deflecting, but beneath the surface I could see the cracks beginning to form. As weeks passed, the sessions peeled back layers of silence. Emily spoke about her fear of failure, the unbearable pressure to live up to a mother who had sacrificed everything for her. She revealed how she had felt invisible, overlooked by teachers and peers who labeled her difficult or lazy because she refused to learn Braille or use a cane. She described the loneliness of being trapped inside a lie so big that it swallowed her true self. I listened, horrified and heartbroken. Had I failed to see her, to understand her? Had my love, though fierce, been conditional, based on her being dependent, broken? Had I unknowingly trapped her? Emily confessed that the blindness was a way to protect herself, a way to control her environment when everything else felt out of control. When reality was too painful, she could disappear behind the mask of disability and become someone else. Someone who commanded attention, sympathy, and care. But the mask had become a prison of its own. She felt trapped by the lie, by the expectations, by the roles she had to play. She was exhausted by the performance, and terrified of losing the only identity she knew. I shared my own pain, how I had lost myself in caregiving, how I had sacrificed my dreams, my social life, my marriage, how I had defended her lie even when doubts gnawed at my mind. Our therapist helped us see that beneath the anger and betrayal lay grief for what we had lost and what we had never truly had. Grief for a relationship that was fractured but still worth saving. There were moments when Emily broke down in tears, when I wanted to comfort her but held back, fearing she would use my compassion against me again. When we both cried silently, understanding that this was the beginning of something painful but necessary. As therapy continued, Emily began to accept responsibility for her actions. She expressed remorse not only for deceiving me, but for the years of emotional captivity she had imposed. She acknowledged how her lies had fractured our family, how her need for control had hurt those who loved her most. But forgiveness was slow. I found myself caught between the desire to forgive and the pain of betrayal. Some days I felt anger flare like wildfire. Other days I was overwhelmed by sadness and loss. Our therapist encouraged us to be patient with each other, to understand that healing is a process, not an event. One breakthrough came when Emily shared a journal she had been writing in secret. The pages were raw, honest, filled with self-reflection, fears, hopes, and confessions. She wrote about her struggle to break free from the lie, about her fear of being rejected if she told the truth, about her hope that one day we could be a family again. Reading her words, I saw the girl I had loved and lost, the woman trying to find her way back. The sessions were not easy. There were arguments, tears, moments of silence so heavy they felt suffocating. But beneath the pain was a fragile thread of connection. I realized that this story wasn't about blindness. It was about seeing each other for who we really were beyond the masks and lies, about rebuilding trust on the foundation of truth. Dr. Matthews once said, "Truth is the first step to freedom." And for the first time that freedom felt within reach. The journey was far from over, but we had taken the hardest step. The winds of change had finally begun to blow through the hollowed halls of our family. Emily's footsteps echoed differently now, lighter, less guarded, as if the weight of 2 decades had slowly begun to lift from her shoulders. But for me, this was more than just a change in her demeanor. It was the reawakening of a daughter I had thought lost. When Emily first told me she had applied for a job, a real job, I almost didn't believe it. Working part-time at a small local diner, scraping by with minimum wage, taking public transportation, and for the first time looking people in the eye without fear or pretense. She was starting over from scratch, and though it was hard and far from glamorous, it was hers, truly hers. I remember the evening she came to visit me after her first paycheck. She walked into my house cautiously, her smile hesitant but genuine. She handed me an envelope, the corners slightly crumpled, and inside was a modest check. Her hands trembled as she showed it to me, proud of every dollar earned honestly. Her eyes no longer hidden behind dark glasses, her steps no longer uncertain or faltering. She was beginning to rebuild herself from the inside out. I could see the strength flickering back to life, one small step at a time. Our family began to slowly heal, piece by piece. Michael came around more often, cautiously mending his relationship with his sister. Greg, after some months of careful conversations and reflection, reached out as well. While the wounds of the past remained raw, we all wanted to find a way to move forward. Emily's project, inspired by her own journey, began to take shape, a nonprofit focused on helping others who had been trapped by lies, addiction, or trauma to reclaim their lives. She called it the Second Door, a symbol of hope, redemption, and second chances. She threw herself into her work with a passion I hadn't seen before. The young woman who once hid behind shadows was now a fierce advocate, speaking at local community centers, organizing support groups, and offering a hand to those still lost in their own darkness. At her first public speaking event, I sat in the front row, my heart swelling with a mix of pride and bittersweet sorrow. Watching her stand there, poised and eloquent, sharing her story of deception, pain, and healing, I saw not only my daughter but a beacon of hope for others. One of her speeches still rings in my ears. I lived behind a lie for 20 years, not because I was weak, but because I was scared, scared to face the truth, scared to disappoint those I loved. But the truth is the only way to freedom. And the second door is always open for those brave enough to find it. Her journey wasn't linear. There were setbacks, nights filled with tears, moments of doubt, and battles with the ghosts of her past. But with every step she grew stronger, more grounded, and more herself. And through it all, I watched her reclaim not just her life, but her dignity. Our relationship, once fractured and fraught with pain, began to mend in ways I had once thought impossible. It wasn't perfect, forgiveness rarely is, but it was real. We learned to see each other anew, not as victims or perpetrators, but as two women bound by love, pain, and the shared desire for healing. One afternoon, Emily invited me to a quiet cafe near her office. Over steaming cups of coffee, we really talked about everything: the past, the future, and the fragile hope of reconciliation. She reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm sorry for all the years I stole from you," she said softly. I squeezed her hand, tears pricking at my eyes. "I'm sorry for not seeing you sooner," I replied. "But I'm proud of the woman you're becoming." Her life had transformed from a carefully constructed illusion into a story of resilience and courage. As for me, I rediscovered parts of myself I thought were lost forever: my own dreams, my own passions, my own voice. The garden I had once abandoned bloomed anew, much like my spirit. And while the scars of the past remain, they are no longer chains. They are reminders of a journey, traveled lessons learned, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her daughter. The more Emily embraced her newfound honesty, the more her world expanded beyond the shadows she had lived in for so long. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. But with every step forward, there was still the lingering weight of the past: the lies, the lost time, the fractured trust. One evening, I attended a small gathering organized by the Second Door Emily's nonprofit. It was a humble affair held in a community center with worn wooden floors and walls adorned with hopeful posters. Survivors, volunteers, and supporters filled the room with soft chatter and quiet determination. Emily stood at the front, poised and radiant, sharing stories of struggle and redemption, with a voice that trembled only slightly with emotion. Listening to her speak, I was struck by the authenticity she radiated, a stark contrast to the facade she had once maintained. Her words carried power because they were born from pain and hard-won wisdom. After the event, several attendees approached her with tears and gratitude. I watched as she embraced each one, offering gentle reassurance and strength. It was a moment that felt like a quiet victory, not just for Emily, but for all of us who had borne witness to her journey. Yet, even amidst this progress, challenges remained. The community was not always kind or understanding. Social media posts about her past occasionally resurfaced, accompanied by judgment and skepticism. Some called her a fraud, others doubted the sincerity of her transformation. But Emily met criticism with grace and resilience. She focused on the work, the lives changed, and the futures reclaimed. At home, our conversations grew deeper and more vulnerable. We began to confront the wounds that had never fully healed. I shared my fears of losing her to the lie. She revealed the loneliness that had driven her to create it. We cried, sometimes in silence, sometimes aloud. We argued passionately, painfully, but always with an undercurrent of love. One afternoon, Emily introduced me to Jonah, a trauma counselor she had met through her work. He was kind and steady, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. Their relationship was slow and thoughtful, built on mutual respect and shared understanding. Watching them together, I felt hope. Not just for Emily, but for our family. For the possibility of new beginnings that honored the past without being chained by it. As the seasons changed, so did we. Our home, once a place of tension and secrets, began to breathe with openness and light. Emily started hosting support groups in our living room, filling the space with laughter and tears, a testament to healing in progress. In quiet moments, I would reflect on the years lost to the lie, the trust broken, and rebuilt the mother and daughter we had become. Though the journey was far from over, we had taken the hardest steps, facing the truth and choosing love over denial. One night, after a long day, Emily turned to me and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me even when I didn't deserve it." I smiled through tears and replied, "I never stopped loving you, even when I couldn't see the real you." Our story, with all its pain and triumph, had finally found its light. My name is Lorraine Mayfield, and my daughter pretended to be blind for 20 years. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. It's hard to sum up a journey like this. 20 years of love and lies, intertwined so tightly that they seemed inseparable. The betrayal I felt cut deep, yet beneath that pain was a fierce, unyielding love that never quite let go. I lost myself in Emily's blindness, or rather, the blindness I allowed. I became a mother to a ghost, a caretaker to a shadow. But through that darkness, I found strength I never knew I had. When Emily finally stepped out of the shadows, she was not the girl I thought I knew. She was stronger, braver, and painfully human. Her lies had cost us dearly, but they also led us to truths we had been too afraid to face. Healing is not linear. It's messy, unpredictable, and often slow, but it's possible for both the liar and the betrayed. Today we stand not perfect, not healed, but together, rebuilding trust one conversation at a time, learning to see each other for who we truly are. I have learned that love is not about fixing someone else. It's about standing beside them even when it's hard, even when the truth hurts. To those watching who have loved someone trapped in a lie, who have felt invisible in their own homes, who wonder if forgiveness is possible, I say this: don't mistake love for blindness. See clearly, love fiercely, and never be afraid to reclaim your own light. Thank you for listening to our story. If it touched you, please share your own story in the comments. Subscribe to Grace's Truth for more emotional real-life narratives. And remember, the second door is always open.